Margaret Chen had been a server at the Willowbrook restaurant for 32 years. At 58, she'd seen everything: marriage proposals, business deals, bitter arguments, and tender reunions. But tonight felt different somehow. The manager approached her station with an unusual request. A young woman named Vanessa was willing to pay $200 for Margaret to accidentally spill water on a specific table, Table 7, where a blind date was about to unfold. Margaret studied the crisp bills in the envelope. $200 would cover her granddaughter's new glasses. Little Emma had been squinting at her schoolwork for weeks. She looked across the elegant dining room at Table 7. A man in his late 30s sat alone, straightening his navy suit jacket nervously. His dark hair was neat, professional. But it was his eyes that caught Margaret's attention. They held a gentleness that reminded her of her late husband. The woman who'd hired her, Vanessa, watched from the bar with cold satisfaction. She wore a sleek black dress and checked her phone repeatedly, clearly waiting for the show to begin. Then the blind date arrived. She wore a simple red dress that somehow made her shine brighter than anyone in designer gowns. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves, and when she smiled apologetically for being 5 minutes late, her whole face lit up with genuine warmth. Margaret guessed she was in her mid-30s. "You must be Thomas," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight nervousness that Margaret found endearing. "Charlotte?" Thomas stood, and Margaret noticed how his shoulders relaxed. "I'm so glad you came." Margaret approached their table with the water pitcher, her hand steady despite her racing thoughts. She'd made her decision the moment she saw Charlotte's kind eyes. "Good evening," Margaret said warmly. "May I start you with some water?" She poured carefully, perfectly, not spilling a single drop. Thomas and Charlotte were already deep in conversation, barely noticing her. "My daughter just turned 7, Thomas was saying, his voice full of love. "Claire is everything to me. After my wife passed 3 years ago, I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to try again. My sister convinced me to give this blind date thing a chance." Charlotte's eyes softened. "I'm so sorry for your loss. And I think it's beautiful that you're honoring your late wife by being open to love again. That takes real courage." Margaret moved away, but she kept watching them throughout the evening. She'd been in this business long enough to recognize something genuine. Thomas spoke about his daughter with such tenderness, how she loved drawing horses, how she'd recently lost her first tooth, how she asked him every night if he was lonely. Charlotte listened with her whole heart, not just her ears. She shared her own story, working as a children's librarian, caring for her aging father, finding joy in simple things like morning walks and old movies. They laughed easily together. When their hands accidentally touched reaching for the bread basket, they both smiled shyly, neither pulling away too quickly. Margaret noticed Vanessa's face growing darker at the bar. The young woman finally stood and marched over. "Excuse me?" Vanessa interrupted sharply. "Thomas, we need to talk." Thomas looked up, confused. "Vanessa? What are you doing here?" "Saving you from making a terrible mistake," Vanessa said coldly, glaring at Charlotte. "I suppose you think you've won." Charlotte looked genuinely bewildered. "I'm sorry, have we met?" Margaret had heard enough. She approached the table with quiet authority. "Miss Vanessa," Margaret said calmly, her years of dignity showing through, "I believe you should leave these people alone." Vanessa spun toward her. "Did you spill the water like I paid you to?" The question hung in the air. Thomas and Charlotte both looked at Margaret, then at Vanessa. Margaret met Vanessa's angry gaze with peaceful certainty. "No, dear, I didn't. And I won't be keeping your money either." She placed the envelope on the table. "Some things matter more than money. I learned that from serving people for 3 decades. Thomas stood slowly, understanding dawning. "You tried to sabotage this date?" "You belong with me," Vanessa said desperately. "We make sense. Same world, same circles." "She's just a librarian, Thomas." "Just a librarian?" Thomas's voice was quiet but firm. "Charlotte has spent the last hour showing me more grace, intelligence, and genuine kindness than I've encountered in years. She's exactly the kind of person I hope my daughter grows up to be." He turned to Margaret. "And you, ma'am, thank you. Your integrity tonight means more than you know." Vanessa left in fury. The restaurant slowly returned to its gentle hum of conversation and clinking silverware. Charlotte reached across the table and squeezed Margaret's weathered hand. "Thank you," she said simply. Margaret smiled. "You two remind me of my husband and me 40 years ago. When something real comes along, you protect it." 3 months later, Margaret was folding napkins when she noticed familiar faces entering the restaurant. Thomas, Charlotte, and a little girl with bright eyes and a toothy grin. "Miss Margaret," Thomas called out. "We wanted you to meet someone special. This is my daughter, Claire." The little girl ran up and hugged Margaret's waist. "Daddy says you're the reason he found his best friend." Charlotte blushed. "We're taking things slowly, but it feels right." They'd requested table 7. Margaret served them with joy in her heart, watching as Claire colored on her placemat while Thomas and Charlotte talked and laughed. Their hands intertwined on the white tablecloth. Sometimes, Margaret thought, the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we never imagine. Sometimes, choosing integrity over easy money means choosing love over loneliness, not just for ourselves, but for others